Hi everyone, this is Jewish Talk coming to you from Nassau Community College on 90.3 WHPC, also streaming on the iHeart and the iTunes app. This program is later archived on Spreaker.com. So hi there, let's begin. My name is Rabbi Perl. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. It all depends on when you have chosen to join us, but anytime or all the time that you join us for a moment, for 5 minutes, all half hour, we appreciate it. So today, I'd like to share with you the significance of yesterday, right? We're supposed to be moving forward, but sometimes, you have to be able to move forward, you have to be able to look back. And it was yesterday, on Shabbos, 71 years ago, on the 10th day of Shavat, when Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, began the leadership of the Chabad movement after the passing of his father-in-law, the 6th Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchok Schneerson, of righteous memory. Now, in the decades that followed, the Rebbe revolutionized, inspired, and guided the post-Holocaust transformation of the Jewish people and in general the world around that still continues to this very day. So yesterday, and of course today, and the days ahead of us, is an appropriate time for reflection, because the Rebbe, Rabbi Schneerson's message and insight continues to inspire us to learn, to pray, to make positive resolutions, and continue our acts of loving kindness. Now, yesterday we observed the yahrzeit of the previous Rebbe. We inspired ourselves of the lessons of the Rebbe. It included our communal gatherings, our prayers. Last week, we all took a visit to the Ohel, both the Rebbe's resting places in Queens. And therefore, I'd like to share with you today some of the insights from the mission statement of what the Rebbe began his leadership some 71 years ago, and how it still continues to inspire us today. I just find it fascinating that, just as we will discuss shortly about the note, in American tradition, as one president leaves, he leaves a private note in the Oval Office. And to me, I find it fascinating that when the previous Rebbe who passed away on the 10th day of Shavat, which was yesterday's date, he actually wrote or put together, codified a special Maimah Chassidus, a special discourse that was to be studied on this Shabbos in 1950, and this was in conjunction with his grandmother's yahrzeit. Well, it turned out that this publication, this discourse, now became the message or the note, because that's the date when the previous Rebbe, passed away. And this discourse became an important spiritual, ethical will, so to speak, that the Rebbe, when he took over leadership, studied, shared with us, amplified. And I'm going to give you a quick synopsis, so to speak, on what was this discourse that the previous Rebbe had written for the day that turned out to be his own day of passing, the 10th day of Shavat. Now appreciate that studying Torah and what a person lives for becomes very much, you could say, amplified and reflective, especially at the end of a person's life. We come to realize the key to what the person's aspiration was. So in this particular discourse that was written by the previous Rebbe, to be studied on this day, and that became the note or the special lesson moving forward by the Rebbe, I share with you that the actual discourse, the words, is words from King Solomon's book of Song of Songs. It says, Bossi Lagani. Those are Hebrew words, where God says, I've come to my garden. The garden is our world. According and announcing his arrival, it's God saying, I'm coming into not the garden, but to my garden, because what has been emphasized is that the world that you and me and all of us live in is really the key essence of what God made the world for. There are myriads of spiritual emanations and worlds, but there's only one place that God said, my garden. It's here, in this lowest realm, where God wants to call this his home. This is the place, that, even though there are many other places where you have supernal worlds and very high levels of light, but it's only in this physical world where God wishes to manifest his very essence. And this is very significant for us to appreciate that this world is God's garden, which means to say that a garden needs tending to. A garden is a beautiful place. A garden has to be protected. We must from time to time, clean it up, rid from weeds, etc. But this wasn't just a happenstance description. The words, my garden, is emphasizing that this truly is and should be and can be a very beautiful place, a place where the Almighty God can be felt. Now, because this world really, everything in this world we're all partners in, we have a partnership in this world in making it a home for the Almighty God. Because we all can see this world can be characterized by frightful spiritual darknesses, but we have the freedom of choice. We are capable of looking at the darkness, embracing it, or rejecting it. This would be the ability that all of us would have in this world that God said is my garden. We have the ability to repress the darkness and even transform it into light. So, yes, this is a world that can be very inhospitable to its creator. And through the difficult work of banishing and transforming the darkness, it actually can become a beautiful garden, a place that God is delighted to inhabit. These are very powerful insights that the Rebbe spoke about on the day on his inauguration. It's fascinating. This week we inaugurated a new president, President Biden. Well, 71 years ago, there was also an inauguration when the Rebbe became the Rebbe of Chabad on this Shabbos, yesterday, the 10th day of Shvat. And we're discussing what he taught us, what he said in his opening statement. Just as we see in the United States of America, great significance is put on what the president says at his inauguration and what his plans are, what his statements are, what his goals are. Well, this actually happened in the Rebbe's presentation as he took the lesson from his father-in-law. Now, one of the exciting ideas that are reflected in this talk is that this generation is called the seventh generation. The Rebbe was the seventh leader of Chabad, and the Rebbe presided over this generation and expressed it as being the seventh generation, the seventh. Now, that's great significance to that. Just as we know the seventh day of Shabbat is a day of completion, a day of thoughtfulness, embracing, transcending. The Rebbe emphasized that we live at a time, our generation, in these last 70 years, is this generation where we have the ability to make completion, to bring an absolute conclusion to all the negativity in this world with the coming of Mashiach. Why do we emphasize 7? Well, historically speaking, when the world was first created, God was in this garden. In the physical sense, we called it the Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden. But sadly, after Adam's what he did in the garden, it actually pushed away the holiness. The Shekhinah, the holiness of God, was pushed away. But it came back in its full glory, starting with Abraham and ending with Moses at Mount Sinai. And that was 7 generations. So 7 is considered in Jewish life and tradition a sense of completion. And just as Moses completed the re-entry of God into this world, as we saw at Mount Sinai, and later on with the building of the temple, the Mishkan, where the glory and the revelation of God was felt in a more greater sense, the ultimate holiness and transformation of this world is also in the 7th generation. And we, this generation, you and me and all of us, are in that 7th generation, which is very significant, because just as we know that the 7 comes preceded by the earlier 6, bringing us to 7, so too we must appreciate where we are today is thanks to all those who preceded us in the early generation, who have given us an extraordinary important mission and responsibility to finish the job. So the spiritual task of this generation, the Rebbe always asserted, is to bring this ultimate holiness into this world, to transform the world, win it over, and use the passion, the excitement that we have, even if it may be from time to time somewhat irrational. But if you really believe in a cause, you go for it, and there's nothing that stands in your way. So too in our generation, where we have so many sideshows that we can very easily rationalize and just wipe away and melt away. When we stay the course and recognize that we are on this 7th generation, we can make a difference. Just as Abraham, he's the first, then the second with Isaac and Jacob, all down to Moses. What was his main idea? Go out there and be inclusive. This is what the greatness of Abraham was. It wasn't just about himself, but he was going out there and trying and fighting and standing up for injustice and so many other things that go on. Well, we too, just as Abraham eventually brought to Moses, well, we today are standing in the same position, so to speak, of being able to now finally complete and make the world an absolute place. And therefore, the Rebbe, all the way back then, 70 years ago, that we have to appreciate the preciousness of this generation. And we have the capacity to consummate the process of making this world a divine abode. And that is due to the fact that we perpetuate the mission that was embarked by the previous generations. And that is why it's so important for us to appreciate this day, to be thoughtful about the day. And I just want to, before I move on to other aspects of this conversation, I just want to share with you just some of the mission statements that the Rebbe made at that time. And that if you really want to love God, you need to love people. It's a very, very powerful idea. The love of God, the love of our traditions, and the love of each other are all bound up in one another. So much so that they're all one. Only when you love your fellow as yourself do you truly love God, who transcends the world and is the master of everything. For this reason, the Rebbe would always, in a sense, he relinquished, I would say, his own physical and even spiritual interest totally for the love of another person, to care for someone else. Because again, if we truly love God, but don't love the tradition or love people, then in a sense, you are truly lacking in your love of God. On the other hand, if you love people, as the Rebbe showed us, and gave us the examples of caring for people, wherever they may be, then that expresses your ultimate love to the Torah and to the love of God as well. And these are some of the important mission statements of the Rebbe. Now let me, for a moment, move on to same idea, but in another sense. You may have seen and read about the tradition in America, where one president leaves a note to the next president on the Oval Office table, and there's a lot of interesting discussion going on of what was the note that was written to President Biden by President Trump. Now, on Thursday morning, my phone and my emails and my text was banging away there with all kinds of theories out there of what was in that letter. So, and I really was a little bit upset because President Biden has described this letter, as a very generous letter. But he said it was private and he wouldn't share it until he had a chance to speak to the former president. But I was receiving from people what I would say ranging from either hilarious or downright rude comments about what President Trump might have written in that letter. And it upset me because at a crucial time like this, we don't need revenge or negativity. It's so important for us to move forward to what are we going to do about this? How are we going to come together? And how can there be more civility in public life or in general? So what I did was I invited everyone to share a meaningful message that potentially could have been left in this note. It could well be that, we'll find out anyway what's going to be there. But I thought it would be a good exercise in thinking about what could be in there. Because in my mind, I entitled a possible sermon with the following headline: Let's learn to overcome negativity with a positivity bias, which includes positive thinking, positive communications, and positive actions. Now that is something I would say is a challenge to our generation. Very much so. So I want to share with you an interesting story that relates to how careful we must be to judge people, not to judge people. A well-respected Torah teacher encountered, this is a story from the Talmud, he encountered a very terrible situation when he was traveling. A Jewish woman had been held captive by a bunch of ruthless men. Fueled by the Torah's command to redeem captives, he pooled his resources and did whatever he could to secure her release. Now the bandits handed him over the woman and they left. Well, he brought her home and she stayed with him overnight. The following morning, in plain view, not in Plainview, Long Island, but in front of everybody, the students of this rabbi saw that their pious teacher was going to the mikveh, which is usually the custom for a man who has had a seminal emission at night. You see where this is going, my friends? This is actually a story in the Talmud. And the Talmud tells us that the teacher asked his students, what did you think happened last night? And they responded, we figured that you wanted to protect the woman from unruly characters who might assault her. Okay. As for the mikveh bit, we assumed that the fatigue of the travel caused him to have a seminal emission. The teacher was exuberant, and he proclaimed, I swear this is indeed what happened. He thereby blessed his students that just as they judged him favorably, so should God judge him favorably as well. Now, why you think Rabbi Perl is telling this story here on this program? Because it contains the answer to a pressing question you might have, or maybe should have. How does a person free themselves from one's own negative qualities? Now, I must tell you, the response to my challenge to everybody about what they may think, what was written in that letter, gave me a lot to think about. That it's possible that it's very hard for a person to break away from negative qualities. Let's face it, we all have stuff inside we want to be rid of, or at least improve. And it can be a lifelong struggle to get there. So let's say you're trying to be kinder, more generous, or even more devout. and everything you've tried so far hasn't helped, what are you supposed to do? Well, I tell you, that story that I've just shared with you holds the answer. Before I explain how, let's take a look at how the Torah describes the type of darkness experienced by the Egyptians during the 9th plague. The Torah describes it, they did not see each other, and no one rose from their place for 3 days. What exactly does it mean that no one rose from their place? Were the Egyptians literally frozen in place? The first and last time a whole nation was actually glued to their seats? For many commentators, the answer is yes. This was not an ordinary darkness. This was a pandemic-level darkness, a miraculous feat God pulled off to shroud Egypt in such a thick blanket of gloom, it actually froze them to their places. But others understand this a little more loosely, explaining that the darkness was so frightening and disorienting, people ended up quarantining at home. Not rising from their place means to venture outside while the terrific darkness shrouded the world. Today, I also want to add a Hasidic interpretation that sheds light on how to be a better person. The first nuance to look at is the Hebrew word mitav. It's M-I-T-A-C-H-T-A-V, which means from his place. While that's a nice translation, a more literal reading would be from underneath it. Mitachtov, I should say, mitachtov. Understand simply, this is a reference to the physical space a person occupies. Therefore, that's the conventional translation. But what's the deeper significance of this phraseology? So along come the Hasidic masters and explain the entire verse to reference to how we ought to relate to others, and in turn, what does that does to us. So again, in the plague is described as one person, they did not see each other. This is a person who does not see his or her fellow. Not that he or she is blind, God forbid, obviously, but that he or she is oblivious, or worse yet, is so wrapped up in him or herself to be able to see, let alone another person's point of view. This is the meaning. It actually happens to the best of us. You're in a store minding your own business, and down the aisle a parent is struggling. His 8-year-old is bickering with a toddler about what type of candy they should strong-arm dad into buying, and dad is quickly losing his patience. He loses his cool at the kids, and all of a sudden there's a full-blown tantrum going on in the produce section. So what do you say to yourself? You tisk and you tisk, wondering why he can't keep it together and respond calmly. Why is this dad going off his rocker? Another example, you're in the synagogue, trying to collect your thoughts and devote some attention to God, and sitting next to you is the Kiddush King, right? He's enthusiastically expressing his thoughts about, about the elections, about whatever. And of course, you roll your eyeballs and try not to lash out, frustrated that your Herculean efforts to bring a little spirituality into your life are being thwarted by this silly discussions. What I'm sharing with you today is this concept. You're not seeing each other. At that point, when you feel that way, you're seeing yourself and yourself only. And you know what happens when you lose that sight? When you don't see others? Well, it's right there in the next word of the verse. No one rose from underneath. A person can get squashed under his own deficiency. If you're throwing shade at people around you, even in your own head, you won't spot their positive qualities. And the one who ultimately suffers will be you. If you can't see the redeeming quality of this Kiddush King talking in shul, your prayer efforts will continue to be frustrating. And the discord and the negativity that you've introduced into the world will eat away at what you're trying to accomplish. If you figure out that he is an excellent person, his efforts to set the lox so deftly on the platter are his way to connect with God, and his gossip is just part of his overall likable chatter, well, that will make you more likable and will make you more prone to connect with God. If you're empathetic to the harried dad in the supermarket and understand he's doing his best, he's overall a great father, and he's simply overwhelmed, that will make you more kind. If you think kind things about other people means you are a kind person, it'll make you a better parent when you arrive home that night. So when you're able to see another person and revel in the positivity and unity it brings, guess what? It will automatically make you a better person as well. That's the reason why I went out with this challenge, to try to get people to think positively. Because usually, how people respond is usually the way they think themselves. A positive person will find some consensus in all opinions. Negative people only see negative. So from a spiritual perspective, holiness is defined by unity. Anything that flows from God is at its core singular and united. By contrast, division, fragmentation, and discord are ungodly. So if you're busy judging everyone and binding yourself to their good quality and blinding yourself to their good qualities, you're playing on the wrong team and you will be stuck in place with nary a chance to improve. If, however, you open your eyes and really see the other person and the positive, holy traits that they possess, of everyone you meet, I share with you that you have actually signed up for the right team, the holy, godly team. And with such teammates, we are definitely going to improve. So let us be like the students, right, who only saw their teacher for the righteous man that he was. When you do, right, the story could have ended differently. But because they thought of him right and it was exactly what he did, when you do so, you become a recipient of the blessings he gave them. What did he say to them? Just as you judge me favorably, so may God judge you favorably. That to me is a very, very powerful concept and how we see. So let's move on forward. That's my point. Let's move forward. Think positive. Recognize, as I said to a couple of people just yesterday, in the last few days, America on the dollar bill says, "In God we trust." If everybody from this side or that side remembers that, and remember how the founding fathers of the United States of America had a spiritual dimension of why they came here, why this was a country, then we'll be judging less negatively, but more favorably. And the more we judge each other in a favorable way, the better chance we have for our own blessings and for all the things. So yes, we sing God Bless America, we say it, but now is the time to do it. And that comes with positive outlook that we can collectively together can make a difference in this world. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a wonderful day. And sei gesund.